My guest this week is Homer Flynn. For nearly 50 years, Homer Flynn has been involved with the murky aesthetics of San Francisco's music, performance, and video group, The Residents. As their chief visual designer and the president of the Cryptic Corporation, which is the Residents' business and public relations interface, Flynn has been involved in nearly all of the group's improbable projects since the mid-1970s. Currently, he lives in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco with his charming wife, Lee Barberry. And it is my great pleasure to welcome to Revolutions Per Movie, Homer Flynn. Hi, Homer.
Yeah, hi, Chris. Nice to be here.
As a young child gravitating towards these Residents records, I kept seeing the Cryptic Corporation popping up, and then things like pornographics, and it was a really complicated web as a fan to figure out what was leading the charge here. You know, since the Residents don't do interviews, I'm assuming most of our listeners know about the Residents and know about the Theory of Obscurity, but could you give a little background about the Residents' Theory of Obscurity and why the Cryptic Corporation came into be?
The Theory of Obscurity, which the Residents picked up from their mentor, the mysterious Ensenada, says that an artist does their most pure work when they are obscure, when they're working purely from their own motivation and devices with no media, no audience, nobody to influence them in any way. And the Residents love that idea. And so they are anonymous. They have always been anonymous and will remain that way. And in a way, part of the reason for that is because of the Theory of Obscurity. The more anonymous they are, the more obscure they can be. So the Cryptic Corporation was, I'm the only remaining member of the Cryptic Corporation, but the Cryptic Corporation originally, we were all friends or at least associates with the Residents back in Louisiana. We all came to California, to San Francisco, kind of for different reasons at different times. And ultimately, we reconnected with the Residents. We loved what they were doing and really wanted to essentially be their enablers. And so by us enabling them, we were hoping to allow them to continue to work in a way, in as pure and unaffected a way possible. And that was a lot of the motivation for it, and that has really remained.
So do the Residents have to go to the Cryptic Corporation to start a project? What's the chain of command like in terms of them having ideas and you giving the go-ahead either with releasing it or finances?
Well, the Residents are a collaboration. A collaboration is probably their most cherished value. And so I'm one of their collaborators. I work with them. They have an idea and they come to me. I feel like for the most part, it's my job to help them realize that idea. But at the same time, I'm part of the dialogue. So if I feel like, well, I don't know, that's maybe that's just not going to work. Well, once again, it's my obligation to tell them that and create a dialogue and then see that dialogue through.
Right. I remember reading, I think, like NME and the conflict that was going on between the Residents and the Cryptic Corporation over Cryptic Corporation releasing the Satisfaction single when they didn't want it and putting out Not Available, and them taking the Eskimo tapes, giving it to Chris Cutler for safekeeping and all the drama with it. Was it hard to work with certain members of the Residents? Were there people in it that you're like, this is the person I go to, I can talk some sense to them?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are personalities, and like all personalities, some are easier than others. I've certainly had one or two that were, I suppose, more my entry point into the group dynamic. Although things change over the years, and you know, they lived together when they started. Well, they don't
Hmm.
anymore. They're all spread out. So, you know, creating a dialogue. I mean, at this point, a lot of times it happens just like you and I are speaking right now.
Hmm.
We get together when and how we can, and
Right.
have those dialogues, have those conversations.
And what was your role in the Cryptic Corporation when it first started? Were you the lead person also with pornographics?
Yeah, I'm I primarily consider myself to be the residence art director.
Okay.
Uh, I'm the person that's responsible for their look. Uh, Initially in graphics and album covers and photos, and then kind of art directing, sometimes directing videos. And I always considered that to be my primary responsibility.
Yeah, the album artwork of the Residents always it just stood out. And then once you realized it was a Resident record or a Ralph Records record, whether it was Tuxedo Moon or MX80 Sound, it definitely had such a visual language. Like this Fingerprints album cover that I'm holding here. It's just incredible.
Right.
And you see this, nothing else looked like this. Still doesn't look like it. And you're creating your own kind of stories when you're looking at it. I mean, I discovered The Residents quite young. I remember seeing a special on The Residents that was included in a thing called Takeoff, where it was a look at San Francisco music. And it was The Residents and Jefferson Starship at that point. And I couldn't imagine such a different language coming from the same city. But do you think The Residents could it have happened anywhere else geographically?
Well, I think at the place and time that the residents really kind of formed officially, maybe it was no place but San Francisco. You know, this was this was kind of uh, hippie time, or the near the end of the most fruitful part of the hippie era. And the cool thing about the hippie era was kind of a anything goes, and so the residents really kind of fit in with that. But and they were always music fans, and that's a lot of what attracted them to San Francisco to begin with. But for instance, the Jefferson Starship, formerly Airplane, they liked them quite a bit. But it seemed like what happened was all those groups where it was really kind of freeform experimentation in the beginning.
Right.
Well, the ones that became successful kind of found their formulas, and then just continued to pursue along the lines of the successful commercial formulas that they had created. And so the residents felt, okay, well, now the groups that we liked so much. It's not that we don't like them anymore, but they're no longer doing that kind of experimentation and progressive music. There's room for somebody, and that's what really motivated them to kind of jump in and start doing it themselves.
Right. Well, they're incredible storytellers. You have Eskimo, Mark of the Mole, God in Three Persons. Was film, I know, we're going to talk about Vileness Fats in conjunction to the latest projects, Triple Trouble, but was film always a initial love and desire as much as music at the time? Were they on equal footing?
Well, they were in terms of the residents' values and in terms of how they saw themselves as as artists, as creators. But the difference the difference was that at that time music was much more accessible to them, and film was not. And to a great extent, that's still true. I mean, yeah, you can make a movie on your phone now, but if you're going to make that into something that could actually get shown and put out there, it's still going to cost a lot of money
Right.
in terms of post production work. And I don't know, had they had a huge hit single, back in the mid '70s, well, they might be famous filmmakers now because they would have had more money to work with. But that wasn't the case, and they mainly focus more on music videos, things that they could get done.
Right.
And it wasn't really until uh, till the pandemic came along and they had tours canceled, they had free time and a little money, not a lot, that they then finally made Triple Trouble their one and only feature.
Yeah, which is kind of amazing that there's so many projects they've done that have ended up as a comic book or a DVD or a touring program. I'm assuming there was a lot of projects that they would have loved to have seen as a feature. Is there some that stand out? Like, was God in Three Persons? I know it came out as a DVD, but was that ever thought of in terms of a theatrical project?
Well, they had, a lot of their projects they feel would lend themselves to, shall we say, a more a broader, more advanced version of what it was that they were doing than just a music album. But when it came down to it, the list of everything that they thought they would love to have the opportunity to take further, God in Three Persons was pretty much the top of the list for a long, long time. And then it wasn't until John Sanborn, the video artist, is someone they have worked with a lot, and they've also been connected with the Museum of Modern Art. And once he got on board in terms of getting involved in God in Three Persons and doing visual video projections for it, then the Museum of Modern Art got very excited. There was one curator in particular that said, "Wow, if I could enable a collaboration between the residents and John Sanborn on this, it would make my career, my year, my whatever." uh, and so like I say, that was always really a high priority for them in terms of something that they wanted to develop further.
So initially, the music videos, which is so weird to say about these films because to me they're bigger. I don't know, that word has changed in terms of its meaning a lot. But back then, they just stood out, just like these albums, just like the music within it, just like the album artwork. So the first one that would be like a proper music video would have been the third Reik and Roll film. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So that was shot on 16 millimeter film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. For anyone who hasn't seen it, I will put links in the show notes to all these videos. It's the set design of your stuff is always incredible. Completely newspaper covered room, completely newspaper covered residence, completely newspaper covered microphone stand, and just the energy coming off this performance. It's Land of a Thousand Dances, I believe.
Yeah, primarily. Yeah, right.
Like, it freaked me out in such a good way. And I think it did for a lot of people. But do you remember being around as this was being made? Did you think, okay, this will be a good promotional thing? Because at the time there was really no place to put it.
No, there was no place to put it. I think that was back when Eraserhead was, like a midnight movie favorite.
Sure.
And, what we saw, Cryptic Corporation and Residence, was some kind of potential opportunity like that to be able to get it out. And it did play some midnight movies around different places.
I mean, is that in camera stop motion that was being done at the end of the film where the atomic shopping carts are coming in and the pork chops are smashing the swastika?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
A lot of the Residents' work, has often queasy storylines, a sense of unease about them. But this really set the tone. And what was the reaction to this when it came out? Because this was 75 or 76 when this was made?
76, I think, is when the album was released. And so the film was, I don't know, probably a year, maybe 2 years later. I'm not really sure, probably a year later. So probably around 77.
Did people appreciate it? Were you able to find places to play it?
No.
Did people understand it? Were
not,
they upset?
not really. I mean, the people that saw it liked it. but there wasn't much.
Okay.
There wasn't much opportunity to be able to show it, really.
Right.
Once again, there was some kind of midnight movie kind of scenarios, but that was about it.
And I had a rubber balloon, I believe, from something called the Ugly Gray Theater. I think it was going to be something that the Cryptic Corporation and the residents were going to be involved in. Can you talk a bit about what that would be?
Well, the Cryptic Corporation formed in 1976, and the residents. You pulled up fingerprints a few minutes ago. That was really their third official release, and Meet the Residents and Third Reik and Roll. The residents pressed those themselves. They did 1,000 of each. By the time it got to fingerprints, they had closets and storerooms full of records that nobody wanted. so, so when they did fingerprints, they only did 500 copies of it because they were running out of storage space to put it.
Right, amazing.
So this is around the time that the Cryptic Corporation was formed, and our point of view was that it was our job to enable the residents, but obviously they weren't selling for shit, and so we were trying to come up with some kind of lucrative money making scheme, whatever,
Sure.
to be able to make everything keep working. And so somebody came up with the idea of, well, let's do a movie theater, and it will be like a specialty theater that primarily shows like science fiction and horror and we could create an identity around that, and everybody jumped in and got excited about it, and we were able to buy a building south of Market in San Francisco, and we're in the process of starting to remodel that building. I mean, I think everybody sort of like two things happened at the same time. First off, we were in the process of trying to remodel that building, and we kind of felt like, okay, we're going to be kind of quiet about this until we have something that we're happy about and want to announce. And so the general area of where this is, there's a lot of gay bars and gay neighborhood and whatever around there. And so some asshole decides that, okay, what we were going to do is we were going to build a gay porno theater there. And he goes around and starts telling the entire neighborhood that we were in the process of building a gay porno theater. And we were completely naive to this. This was going on outside of us, little busy beavers working away. And so one of the things was that there wasn't enough street parking around there. And
Right.
so you have to go and you meet with the city planning commission and you try to get some kind of a pass on having to have that because there's a lot of street parking at night. So if there's enough street parking night, you don't need a parking lot, blah, blah, blah. So the planning commission had the meeting. We went in to the planning commission, and here's the whole neighborhood. They've been passing petitions around.
Wow.
They've got teachers from the daycare center, all in arms because we're going to be building a gay porno theater there.
Wow.
Well, about that same time, it was I can't remember the guy's name now. There was a writer for the British Music Press who published reviews of Meet the Residents, Third Reik and Roll, and Fingerprints, all in the same edition of NME, and they got like 2 5-stars and 1 4 or 4.5-star review. And at that point, those records started flying out of those closets.
Incredible.
And ultimately, we decided, well, maybe this is actually something that we can make a living off of despite despite the previous few years, whatever.
Oh, that's
Uh,
incredible.
yeah, so you had these two things that happened sort of coincidentally, but
Right.
ultimately, uh, that was kind of the end of the Ugly Gray Theater. Uh, we were being pulled positively in the direction that we wanted to go to anyway, and the fight to create the Ugly Gray Theater did not seem like it was worth it.
Right. So then did Duck Stab kind of become the first well-selling record in real time that you put out?
Yeah, it did. It did. Um, I think Duckstab shipped 10 or 20,000 copies or something like that.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God, that must have been a totally wild.
it was a phenomenal amount. Yeah. Um, and um, and yeah, at that point things really kind of took off.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you before we get into the video from this. I since you were the graphic person, I've always loved this early Ralph logo of the face. Do you remember what the inspiration was of creating this weird smirk?
Uh, y- you know, um, it was based on a doodle that I did, and it came time to residents needed a record label, and and so
That simple, right?
you yeah, it's like you look around and it's like, oh, well, they did a record label. Oh, well, this Beatles kind of cool, uh,
Right.
and ultimately that became it. Yeah.
So was a lot of the graphics of these albums done? I mean, this is pre-computer digital age, so a lot of X-Acto knife and Letraset, or
Oh
how were
yeah.
you making these things?
Um. Well, exactly what you're saying. I mean, you know what ruby lith and amber lith is?
I don't think so.
Probably not. Um. When you would create these old time analog graphics, you would, in a way, it's like, I mean, I do a lot of Photoshop now, and if you go into Photoshop or InDesign or whatever, a lot of the process is working in layers, and well, that's really an echo of old time analog graphics, where you worked in a series of physical layers, and so there were these films that you would create. You would create your graphics as a series of overlays. You take that into a graphic uh, house, a shop, and they would have like a gigantic camera, and they would shoot all these things as a series, and then they would go back and in the dark room and combine these things and assemble your printing decks. Yeah, it was a long time ago. But yeah, my history, whatever, really was analog graphics, and then I kind of started switching over to digital graphics and Photoshop like in the '90s.
Well, how did the residents in the Cryptic Corporation meet Graeme Whifler, who was a director of some of the early works?
How did we meet Graham Whiffler? Um, I think it was more, as I remember, more of a chance meeting than anything else.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm well, this goes way back. Yeah, I'm not remembering the who made the initial contact, uh, and how that came about. Oh, I think what happened. Yeah, I think what happened was that somebody wanted to use the residence studio to shoot I think it was a music video or something, and Graham was a an assistant on that,
Okay.
and we connected with him at that point.
Well, were the residents uneasy? I know they did a lot of collaboration, but were they uneasy kind of letting go after, kind of holding the reins visually for so long on the Hello Skinny video?
No, not really. They quickly became fans of Graham's work. Plus the fact that they were working on other stuff themselves too. I mean,
Right.
they were, I think, working on both Duckstab and Eskimo at that time.
Right.
And the, if it wasn't somebody that they liked as much as Graham, it might have been different. But they able to kind of trust him and let go.
That film, I was showing my wife Hello Skinny the other night, and I said, if you want to understand me, the 15 seconds where Skinny discovers the chopped torso, and there's a photo of him with a hose, and then you barely see someone in an alley moving a hose up and down. I said, that 15 seconds kind of made me. I don't know what it says about me, but to me, that was like, I want to make something as haunting and lyrical and spooky and magical as this. I'm sure you were involved with the art direction. There's that amazing scene at the end with the spinning legged pinwheels and, the red tubs, and it's beautiful art direction in it. But when you saw the finished product, it must have been quite amazing.
Yeah, it was. It was quite spectacular.
So again, you're making Hello Skinny. Where does this go? Is it just midnight movie time again? Is there starting to be places that this can be seen?
Well, I think there was, at least at that point. I mean, we weren't to MTV yet, but I think the idea of music video was kind of starting to kind of pop up on the horizon, and it was obvious that this was something that was going to happen,
Right.
and ultimately, this was an opportunity for Residence Visuals to come to life.
Right. And I remember Nightflight being really early supporters of these films,
very much,
pre MTV.
and they are still around and still supporting.
Yeah. I just got my subscription this year. And I'm in hog heaven. It's amazing. And the Residents recently did a collaboration with Nightflight.
Yeah, it was Duck Stab. They were after it was their 40th anniversary. I think it will be 2 years this summer.
Okay.
And ultimately the Residents were in the process. I mean, they had something like 6 or 7 different performance touring opportunities that were all canceled and or rescheduled during the pandemic, and for one of those, they were doing all of Duck Stab, and so the fact that they were rehearsing it made it fairly easy to go in and say, oh, to Nightflight, hey, we'll do Duck Stab, and they were crazy about it, so it was good.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's so much in the Residents' histories that feeds in on itself, comes back, and influences other things. Because sometimes, a project would start, like you'd have the American Composers series, and there'd be two versions of that, 2 volumes of that, and then it seems like they would transition into another project. When they're coming to you with something like the commercial album, 41-minute songs, where do you begin with that? I mean, I'm sure that you're also being like, okay, we're starting to be able to make music videos. We can do 4 of these. I know later the DVD came out where all 40 were visually realized, but at the time, did it seem like a great opportunity to make a bunch of smaller short films that could be included as one bite? Or was there a bigger picture in mind of all 40 songs when this initially came out?
No, there was never any. I mean, I think, yeah, given a perfect world, they would have loved to have done all 40, but it was pretty obvious that wasn't going to happen. And they we were licensing their stuff into the UK at that time. I can't remember. I'm spacing out the name of the label that we were working with at that time, but the label is the one that put up the money for that.
Okay.
To get that done.
Yeah, those 4 short films, Moisture, Act of Being Polite, Perfect Love, and Simple Song. Greatest 4 minutes plus, the little tag at the beginning of the Residents in a tank. Just perfect filmmaking. Such a great combination of like tip of the hat to, experimental filmmaking of the 60s and, where music video was going. Do you know what some of the residents' filmmaking influences were?
Well, and they have a pretty broad range of influences. Um, I know that more than one of them are huge Fellini fans.
Hmm.
Um, and they loved Eraserhead. They are pretty huge fans of film noir. Um,
That makes sense.
although back then I don't think film noir was even a category back then, but they loved those old, as far as they were concerned, the old black and white, 1940s and 50s movies. Um, I'm trying to think of others, but they're pretty huge um, film buffs. Um, oh, Billy Wilder, they're pretty big Billy Wilder fans, particularly in his earlier days. When he became successful with Some Like It Hot, but they loved more his earlier stuff, Sunset Boulevard. Yeah.
One of the earliest places I could get a VHS tape with stuff on it was ordering it directly through Ralph Records. And sometimes I would talk to Frank Johnson, your computer that you had at the time. It was very nice, very kind, always was encouraging and sometimes apologetic. But I just thought that was so ahead of the curve in a way of just being able to get like a compilation of various Ralph artists and the works at the time. And that was when I feel like Vileness Fats was starting to be teased a bit. Like some footage was starting to kind of be able to be, like there were some shots being put out and little glimpses of it. What was the process of rediscovering Vileness Fats like?
It went through a lot of different changes, and I suppose the most extreme discovery, the residents, they really saw video as a coming thing, and they loved the flexibility of video, um, just in terms of, film was expensive, film is still expensive,
Yes.
just to buy and process it. You can't take a lot of risks with it. Whereas with video, the equipment, the videotape, it was all fairly cheap. So they went out and bought video cameras, and what they got was, at the time, was considered to be industrial quality, black and white, real video.
Right. This is like early 70s.
Yeah, exactly. And as far as they were concerned, it was black and white, but they love black and white. And it looked good on their monitors. It's like, let's do it. And it wasn't until several years later that ultimately they realized the shortcomings of the format. They realized, while it looked good on a monitor, you try to blow that up on a screen, which was certainly their fantasy, and it looks like shit. Um,
It's true. It looks so amazing. Like the footage that has come out, it does look really beautiful on a small screen. It's very rich and definitely has its own sense of drama to it.
yeah, yeah, and but once they realized that they were never going to be able to show this to anybody other than gather a bunch of people around somebody's living room, uh, they kind of lost their enthusiasm for it. But at the same time, they had shot about, I don't know, 60, 70% of the script. They had a lot of stuff, and it was cool. And they kept, what can we do with this? What can we do with this? And it wasn't until, several years later, at some point, I don't know, early to mid 80s, that they realized, okay, and this, once again, this VHS was coming out at this point. They realized, okay, well, we can make some kind of, you know, rough edit of this. And at the same time, they were also became, the sound on it was never really done very well. They had more the intention of using it as a placeholder and dubbing it back in later. And And ultimately, though, they became kind of charmed with the idea. Well, this could be one of the coolest silent movies ever made. So the whole idea of using little bits of sound here and there, but then mainly doing it as a silent movie, and that was like whatever happened to Vileness Fats. That
Right.
was mid '80s or something, and that allowed them to actually get some of the work out there, and that was after the kind of heartbreak of having to essentially bail on it because the format was so poor. Ultimately, it was satisfying to get something out there, even if it was 10 years after the fact.
Right. So, what is the connection between Vileness Fats, Double Trouble, and Triple Trouble?
The missing link there is the Theory of Obscurity film, and is a filmmaker, Don Hardy, who is an established documentary filmmaker, approached us about doing a documentary on the Residents.
Right.
2013 or 14, something like that. I forget, sometime around in there. And so, I was really Don's enabler on the sort of cryptic resident side. And, he wanted to gather up as much existing residence film and video as possible. Just because if you're going to edit something like this, you want to have as many resources as you can.
Right.
And Don then became incredibly enchanted and captivated by Vileness Fats, which then just stimulated me and the residents to think, well, yeah, it's pretty cool. What can we do with this? And there had been a lot of ideas and suggestions over the years of potentially finishing it. But by that time, by 2013, 14, whatever, when Don was, there was no longer any fantasy of finishing it. I mean, the Vileness Fest material is charming on a lot of different levels. One of which is artistic, but one of which is it's a lot of naivete there, and you don't go back and recreate naivete. Naivete is inherent in certain situations, but that's just because the people involved haven't gotten smart enough,
Right.
experienced enough. Yeah. Well, so what happened was that they wanted to carry the idea of Vileness Fats forward. They weren't going to finish the original, but somebody came up with the idea of, okay, well, what if we write a brand new screenplay that is set in contemporary times that then still follows the same plot lines as Vileness Fats. So in other words, we're updating it. And so the whole idea is that the primary character, one of the things that the residents were doing at that time, they were performing as Randy, Chuck, and Bob. And Randy Rose, the singer, okay, so they come up with the idea that we're moving things, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years into the future. And Randy has died. And his son, Randy Jr., inherits a footlocker full of the original tapes to Vileness Fats. He becomes incredibly captivated and obsessed by it, starts watching it, and then realizes that his own life, which is borderline out of control, is paralleling the life of the protagonist of Vileness Fats. So you have two things going on. You have him watching original Vileness Fats on one of those old monitors, and then his own life then paralleling those events. And that was the residents' idea for a screenplay. They wrote it. We went, yeah, great idea. And at that point, I went out and started to try to raise money for it. and raised a little bit, not enough to do the feature, but at least enough to go out and shoot some footage, and then uh, to then use as a trailer to try to raise more money.
Right.
And like I say, we did raise some, but we didn't probably raise more than 10% of what we needed. Um, then time moves on. The lockdown comes along. The
Right.
residents are getting tours canceled right and left, and so they went, and so that rewritten screenplay they called Double Trouble, um, because it was an echo of Vileness Fats. Um, so then, when the tours start getting canceled, they had they needed something to do. Then what are we going to do now? And they went, okay, all right, let's make a movie, but we'll do it with the amount of money that we have. We're going to rewrite the screenplay again, which they did,
Right.
and so the third iteration became Triple Trouble.
How did the residents and yourself, how do you cast these films? Do the residents kind of stay out of the way? Do they like give you notes, or are they on set hiding? What's the process like in terms of working with them on a film?
Well, yeah, they're certainly around, and yeah, they had no problem, giving me notes. And I mean, they're, in a way, they're sort of ghostly figures hanging out around the edges.
Hmm.
But if there are things going on, for the most part, we have a long relationship. They basically trust me.
Right.
But if there's something going on that they don't like, or they don't agree with, they'll certainly let me know.
Yeah, it was really exciting as a fan to see like the actual video reel boxes for Vileness Fats with like the Cryptic Corporation stencils, and there's like suitcases, and there's like not available artwork on the wall, and wormwoods on the turntable. There's a lot of for Residents fans, there's a lot of Easter eggs and a lot of kind of loving tributes in this film.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to make.
There's a very powerful part in the film where Randy's talking to his son, and Randy has appeared to him, and he says many things, but one of the most powerful things I think he says is, dead people don't have any passion. You're around for 70, 80 years, then boom, you're dead forever. Forever's a fuck of a long time. Do you feel like the residents are going to continue forever, or do they have a final project? What does it feel like? Because I read a quote once from the residents that said there was more ideas than time to complete them.
Yeah, well, there's no shortage of ideas. That's for sure. There's uh, and there's no shortage of ideas. And as the residents age, and of course they are aging, uh, increasingly there's a shortage of time. Um, they are in the process of finishing up a new album right now.
Amazing.
The album is called Doctor Dark, um, and um, and they're quite happy with it. They are. It's interesting because they are. There is a guy named Edwin Outwater. Um, Edwin is the music director for the San Francisco Conservatory, and he's a big Residents fan. Um, when Edwin had lived in San Francisco for a while, he moved around various places. He came back, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, something like that, and was very interested in potentially collaborating with the residents, and so that has happened, or is in the process of happening. And he's writing orchestral arrangements
It's
um,
incredible.
for parts of this album, and it's interesting because it's going to be in a way uh, a kind of like a mix up of more rock elements and classical elements in a way that I think is turning out quite nicely.
It's so interesting because the residents started working in analog in terms of recording, and then obviously when digital came around, and synthesizers and emulators and pornographics being able to work in computer art. What are the residents feeling about like the future of technology and AI entering the picture?
Well, honestly, they're kind of excited to get involved in it. I know they've done a little bit of experimentation with AI music, but they haven't found anything yet that really kind of pushed their buttons.
Right.
I mean, if you want to create various iterations of bossa nova, it can do that pretty cool, but that's not really what the residents are interested in. What they would love to do would be to take some of their own music and kind of funnel it into an AI generator, and then give it a few prompts and see what it spit out. And that will probably happen at some point. Whether they like it or not, who knows? I mean, I've been experimenting with AI in terms of generating images, and I've enjoyed it quite a bit. The Dr. Dark album primarily has 3 characters and a few side characters, and I've been using AI to try to generate versions of those characters to then use as part of the packaging for the album. One other thing, I guess, that I might mention that is kind of a fascinating project at this point. The residents are working with a guy who is a very successful French artiste. His name is Loris, Loris Graeme, and Loris just had a huge installation at the Petit Palais Museum in Paris. He took over the entire museum for this installation.
Wow!
And his vision, Loris is a huge fan, and his vision was that the residents would do a 1-song concert that would be the grand finale of this installation. And so, they wrote a new piece of music for it. They were rehearsing. They were getting ready to go. And then there were some kind of problems between him and the museum, and they tried moving it somewhere else.
Oh,
and
no.
The whole thing fell apart. But ultimately, it has come back together again. And so he is moving his whole installation to another museum in Geneva. And so now, at this point, the residents will be performing their 1-song finale at this museum in Geneva on October the 18th.
Incredible.
And then they're coming back to Paris for the Art Basel Art Fair, and we'll perform it again there. So that's something that's kind of sitting out there that they're really kind of looking forward to.
It's so great. I love that. I mean, for 5 decades, there's no one like the residents. Again, watching Triple Trouble, and when the soundtrack elements from Vileness Fats came up, it was like time travel for me. I was back in my living room, trying to escape junior high depression, just imagining what the light was like, against the stereo as I'm like leaning into this thing, just imagining what in the hell is Vileness Fats, what it could have been, what it could have looked like. The residents and your work, helping them with the Cryptic Corporation has totally influenced my life. And I really appreciate being able to talk to you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's always nice with somebody who is knowledgeable and asks intelligent questions, not just, why the eyeballs?
Yeah. So that's my next question. Why the eyeballs? No, kidding.
Yeah,
I hear you. And at the end of every episode, I ask the same question, but I tailor it depending on what we're talking about. So on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, how many hearts like a silken sponge that calls saliva love do you give the residents' body of work in film?
I don't know. Personally, I'd probably give it like maybe a 7 or an 8. Mainly because I think what they've done is good, but they've never been able to quite realize their ambition. So they've set the bar a little higher than they've been able to get up to. And had they, maybe they should have set the bar a little lower. I don't know. But for what they've done, I would give them 7 or 8.
Well, I think it's a bar that influenced a lot of filmmakers and musicians and writers and performers. And please, if you see them, thank them from the bottom of my heart, from a lot of us, for the amazing output.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you. I really appreciate your comments, and I will certainly pass them on.
Thank you, Homer.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday. We are a completely independently produced affair, so the best way to support us is to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app and to subscribe to our Patreon over at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get exclusive weekly bonus episodes every Sunday, as well as one-of-a-kind handmade Revolutions Per Movie goods that I send out to you. You can follow the show on social media at Revolutions Per Movie and find more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!